work, but quite frankly, some of the most important work. And I can talk more about that in a second if you're interested. Next is collaborative action, and this is where the providers come into play. We call them networks. Some people call them action teams. Some people call them clusters in other communities. It's whatever you want. But you have networks of providers that come together around these outcomes, and they actually adopt a continuous improvement approach. So every single day, they're thinking about how are we going to collect, manage, and utilize data in early childhood to improve kindergarten literacy, so that we actually identify what works. So in Cincinnati, one example is that when we looked at the data in Cincinnati, not national data, in Cincinnati, it was clear that if a kid went to a public preschool that was an underserved, underprivileged kid, that kid was more prepared than another kid. No two ways about it, right? If they were free and reduced lunch, they were more prepared. And when you looked at the data, that was because there was a certified teacher in that classroom, right? I joke that I could be an early childhood teacher, right? That would be tragic. So they learned that having a certified teacher mattered and having a low student-teacher ratio mattered. So the United Way, instead of investing in this, that, and the other, started to invest with the universities in how to get more early childhood providers certified and got more adults who are certified in the same classroom so that the student-teacher ratio went down. So we've had the state of Ohio has cut early childhood spending in half, and the results have continued to go up or remain steady, right? And that's actually a victory in our minds. So the bottom line is you're bringing together the providers to have them work and identify what gets results, and then build a plan to scale those practices. And then the last piece is threefold. One is to engage the broader community in this. Next is to actually get the funders to work together, which can be a trick. And we have a ton of lessons on this. I mean, I got crushed twice in Cincinnati, where we tried to bring all the funders together and ask them to create a pooled fund to support these outcomes. What do you think the answer was to that wonderful solicitation?
No.
Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? Why are we going to give up control of our dollars just because you tell us these outcomes are important? So we had to go through all these different, we had to learn all these lessons about effective ways to work with funders, and I'm sure some of the funders in the room could talk to us about ways to work effectively with them. And then support for an anchor entity. This is absolutely critical. This requires staffing. You need somebody who's waking up every day thinking about this, right? And we say there's three key roles. One is a chief cat herder, right? This is the role that I got to play every day, which was my only job was to make sure that everybody was still on the bus every day. Because every day somebody made somebody mad, right? Whether it was a superintendent did something to the chamber, did something to the whatever. Every day was just putting out those fires and developing a plan that people could get behind. Second, you need a data analyst. You need somebody who's actually going to collect data, not to beat people up. We've had the same guy ever since we started, a guy named Jeff Zimmerman. Love Jeff, right? Jeff has never given data to the newspaper, ever, unless the partners said, please give that data to the newspaper. His job is to get the data to the people that need it, and to report that data transparently to the community every year. That's it. That's his job. And then the last role is facilitators, to actually work with providers who are already overstrapped, who have no time and energy, to actually help them build these collaborative action plans. You've got to have people like that in place, right? So essentially this framework outlines what's the do differently. And there was a guy in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo, Michigan has one of the best partnerships that's emerging. It's called the Learning Network. And the guy that runs it is essentially a Zen Buddhist. I don't know how that guy, I mean, he'll be in the middle of a storm and he'll just stay completely mellow. And he had a moment where everybody was going nuts, right, at his partnership table. They were like, what are we doing? We're not doing anything, right? And he just sat there, and finally he said, can I just say one thing? He said, action looks different now. He said, action looks different now. Action is not us investing $200,000 in a new program. That's not action anymore, because we've done that for 100 years, and we're seeing the same results. Action now, right, is us actually looking at data. That's action. So whether or not you believe it, right now we're acting. And right now, this network around early childhood that he was talking about, this network is acting. They're not being impulsive. They're being disciplined. And they're looking at data. And they're actually figuring out what works. That's action, right? That's a different ballgame. And that to me was I was in the room and I walked over later and I said, you made me cry. But he essentially captured that this isn't typical business as usual. This is us actually being disciplined. And for those of you who read Good to Great, how many of you read Good to Great? Did you read Good to Great for the social sector? Right? He put this out after Good to Great. It's 40 pages long and $15, maybe $30. And he said essentially everything that I said in the book is exactly right. It's the same thing, right, for the social sector. Right? He said two things, though. It's harder. He said the social sector is harder to do this. It's because you don't have direct influence. You don't have hierarchy. You have influence. You have to do everything by influence peddling. Right? That was one thing. And his second thing is that in that environment, being disciplined is extremely difficult. It is so easy to chase the dollar. It is so easy to chase the almighty dollar. Right? The feds will put out another grant tomorrow, and all of us will be talking about it. And everybody will run after it because it's what we have to do, right? But it isn't disciplined when we do that. That's not disciplined. That's just us responding to what somebody else wants us to do. Discipline is saying, I know what's right for Austin, or Houston, or Cincinnati, or Seattle, or Portland. That's discipline. I know what's right. So that's the big difference. So let me stop there. Does that help? Okay, what questions do you have about stuff in here? Yes?
Why are you resistant to calling this a model?
I am resistant to calling this a model because I believe that another thing in this, and now I literally am on a soapbox. I just was, I think, and I guess I'm back on the soapbox. But I think we in the social sector, and I say we, I've worked in the school system, I've worked in nonprofits, I've worked in philanthropies. We in the social sector we have a picture of what model means, and it means do it exactly like this. And what I can't tell you in your community, where are you from?
Austin.
Austin, okay, I can't tell you in Austin what the exact 1, 2, 3 step order is, right? I can't do that. And you may already have, may already identified your outcomes. I don't know what those are for Austin, I don't know what that looks like, I think E3 does, but my idea is that there are some outcomes, right? But I'm not going to tell you what order to do them in. But what I am going to say to you is pay attention to all this stuff, right? And do it in the way that your community thinks makes the most sense, your leadership makes the most sense. But I'm not going to do a model that says do this, then do this, then do this. That's not how this works. It's very messy. And so you need that cat herder to help figure out what are those existing assets across this, and what's the right timeline to make it happen. Is that a good enough answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. But pretty soon, I'm going to be honest with you, we're very worried, and I've talked with some of Jeff's colleagues about this at FSG. We're very worried that collective impact is becoming collaboration. We have one community where they called us up and they said, we've got 9 collective impact initiatives going in education. Can you help us out? I said, we've got a lot to talk about, right? And we've talked through it. I think we've gotten to a better spot. But we're going to have to set some standards of what do we mean by collective impact. What do we mean, in our case, by building cradle-to-career civic infrastructure. And related to each of these, we're boiling it down to some key components that you have to pay attention to.
Do you have rubrics for that?
Yes, we do. So you can go, so we're about to launch in probably late February, early March, a set of standards that have been vetted by the field, by the practitioners on the ground. But right now, if you go to our website, there's something called the Progress Assessment Tool that you can go to. And I think it's good. I think what we'll put out later in February will be better. But I think it's good. And if you want to start with that, and then contact Kelly, who's on there, she'll help get you the other version. Other comments or questions? I don't believe it. So where are we at? We got a few more minutes. I just thought this is a little visual that may make you happy. So some people say, what does it actually look like? Well, this is just sort of how it kind of plays out in some communities. Is that if you have certain outcomes, say these are the 5 that we see most consistently across sites nationally, right? Early childhood, 3rd grade reading, high school readiness, graduation, college access, completion. There is a big difference between the backbone and the conveners. So one thing that comes up a lot is, Amy talked about was turf, right? She talked about turf, that everybody wants to fight for control. And in the collective impact article, they talk about the backbone organization. And the backbone organization is the glue that fits everything together, but we also think there's this different thing called conveners, right? And in that community that said we have 9 collective impact things going on, mostly what they were describing was the role of these conveners, right? They have a leader that is playing quarterback or playing team leader around college completion. They have an entity that's doing that, and that's wonderful. And their job is to rally around a critical outcome, identify what that is, bring together different partners who all care about that outcome, not just the providers or the system leaders, but maybe the funders too, to identify the best practices and to secure funding, right? But what the backbone entity does is make sure that those people have the data that they need to actually succeed, or that they have the executive level champions that will actually help them move the ball forward. And that's a different role. Does that make sense? And so one guy in Detroit, the head of the United Way there, a guy named Mike Brennan, he said, when we started talking about this in Detroit, and how many of you are familiar with Detroit? There's a few challenges there, right? They have more stuff going on in Detroit. I was there, I guess early last week, on Monday. They have more challenges in Detroit. He said, our problem, he told a story. Was a guy named Sully who landed the plane in the Hudson, right? He said, right after the engines went out, they quickly, some genius called up and said, how are you doing? And he said, it's my plane and I'm going to land it. That was it. Then he apparently hung up. And he said, the problem is that we think there's only one plane to land. In our work, there's hundreds of planes to land. There are hundreds of planes to land. And all we need is an air traffic controller, and then we can all own our own plane, whatever that may look like. And so the idea being is that there could be an owner of this, somebody that steps up and says, I want to lead right here. Awesome, lead right there. That's outstanding, right? I want to lead here. That's great. And then there's this backbone entity that knits it all together. But you've got to have that central entity that's actually pulling it all together. But this kind of framing can help you get over some of the turf issues that invariably start, because everybody wants to be the backbone now. It's kind of a cool thing to do, right? I want to be the backbone. Well, okay, a body has one backbone for a reason, right? One. If you have 2, it's harder. So just have one. And you as a community, how can you figure out what that's going to be, and then what other roles can we actually figure out to make this happen? Questions? Yeah.
No, just a comment on the value of this that I think is really important. I mean, the truth is that the backbone organizations, unless they're situated in United Way or something like that, they're often newer organizations, right? And the community-based organizations who've been working in a particular social issue, early childhood, for example, they've been doing it for decades in many cases. And the turf issue is huge. If you are able to clearly delineate those roles, that goes a long way in getting some of those critical community organizations and education institutions to rally to the work of the backbone organization in the common agenda, because you've assigned the role that honors how much work has already gone into a given issue in a community. And in E3, that's definitely one of the things that we had to navigate in our early stages.
Yeah, two mantras there. Clarity is critical is number 1. Right? When you start this, everybody's tripping over themselves. Everybody wants to be doing this, that, and the other. Can you get clear roles and responsibilities delineated? If you can get, the faster you can get to that, the better off you're going to be, and that's where a lot of the political issues come up.